think it's time to get to the fun part of
Yeah.
it. We have a tier list that we are going to do about teams that Miami is facing, in their QB rooms. Obviously, we think very highly of Carson Beck, but there are a lot of QBs that there are a lot of QBs that we are going to have to look at in terms of Miami facing this year and the ACC and see where Carson Beck stands up in terms of comparison of them. I think easily you probably have him high here. You want to look at all these different QBs here, but we'll start off just by kind of looking at the teams Miami's going to face, and then we'll kind of shift off into a few other people as we kind of go on through it all. So, but I'll start off first with the biggest two names here. Obviously, we're going to have Carson Beck here, and we'll start off. Jaden, where do you want to put him?
Among ACC quarterbacks, I would say A, maybe.
A, okay, solid start.
I would say A because if you're looking at all the quarterbacks in the ACC this season, I'd put maybe 2 or 3 guys above him. So I think if you're a top 5 quarterback in the ACC, maybe that's like an A tier. I don't think S tier. S tier to me believes that you're one of those top quarterbacks in the nation that you may even like potentially first round pick kind of level of a very good player. I'll put A tier. I think it's a solid tier for him.
Yeah, I think that's very fair because what you're looking for is a bounce back. So obviously there's not necessarily things set in stone right now with Carson Beck. So you are a little bit of projecting to see if he can get back to 2023 form. I think there is a world where by the end of the season we are saying he's an S tier. But I think A tier is very safe and I think fine for now.
Yeah, I'm at like an A- B+ right now. Gotcha. And then as the season goes forward, like that could be like maybe an S.
A high A, a low S, something like that. I think if he can really get back to where he was in 2023, which you hope if you're a Canes fan, I think that's very fair. But next up, we have Cade Klubnik, kind of the biggest name in the ACC in terms of QBs. I think this is pretty easy. Jaden, where do you have him?
S tier. I think this is pretty fair. Yeah, considering how well he was playing last season in a college football season with Clemson. I think it's got to be him. I mean, he's probably in my eyes. I think he's the top 5 for the Heisman. Even that's how good of a player I think he will be. I'm very happy we're not playing him, and if we were, we would be in the championship game. He was very good last season. 25 touchdowns, 3 picks. 36 touchdowns, 6 picks. Very, very good.
25 to 3 in just ACC games last year, including the ACC championship game right there. Kind of dominated the conference. Only really struggled against Georgia. It was only really bad game was the opener against Georgia. But a real dual threat QB, real rushing threat as a quarterback, and if you're looking at this, the Clemson is a staple year in year out, and he's kind of developed over the years with Clemson and really stepped into a full role. And that 36, like I said, 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, another 7 TDs on the ground, another 400 yards. You look at he earned 146 of 183 votes for ACC Player of the Year. He's gonna have his go-to weapon with Antonio Williams still there. I think this S tier is probably the most likely thing he's going to end up being, unless something really bad happens and he slips very far. But you really like what he can do for Clemson, and probably the best. He's probably the best QB in the conference if you look at it right now.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then next up we have Chandler Morris. Chandler Morris for Virginia, who is who transfer QB, I believe. Let me just double check on that. But he is a transfer. Actually, wait. I'm going to stick with teams Miami's going to play this year. Okay. I'm going to go next to Kevin Jennings of SMU. Yeah. Kevin Jennings, we saw what they did at we saw what he was able to do at SMU last year, lead them to a college football playoff berth. Probably very solid year for SMU's first year in the ACC. Where would you put him right now?
I'm between probably a high A tier, maybe a low S tier right now.
I
would put high A tier. Let's put high A tier.
High A tier.
Yeah, okay. I say that I actually think he is better than Carson Beck, at least entering the season.
Mm-hmm.
He was fantastic for SMU, one of their key players. The system that they had between him as a dual threat with Rashad Smith as a running back was very fun to watch. He was, the 11 picks obviously was his biggest problem. But he was incredible for them, and his CFP game against Penn State was pretty bad. But you did watch him play, and he had a great game against Clemson. A great game.
I mean, like big comeback that SMU was tried to force there to kind of fight to the very end against Clemson for that ACC championship. So, I was thinking B just because the interceptions are a little bit high.
Yeah,
but also his passing numbers and his overall numbers could be kind of bumped down a little bit just because SMU, if you look at a lot of their games last year, they kind of ran roughshod over a lot of the teams they played. So
yeah, I see him honestly a little bit better in my eyes than Beck, just from what I saw him. Also, what he can do as a dual threat that Beck doesn't have. I'm a little bit higher entering the season on him.
But do you think he's gonna potentially lose a little bit just because he's gonna lose a guy like Brashard Smith, who was second in receptions?
I think SMU is going to regress this season. I don't think they're going to be as good as they were last season, but I also still like Ken Jennings. Entering the season, I like Ken Jennings. I do think SMU will not have as good of a season they did last season. I'll be pretty blunt with that.
Yeah, that's fair. I think they had a kind of breakout into the league. I mean, into the conference last year type of year, and so it's going to be hard to kind of replicate that. But moving on, we have a transfer QB here with Miller Moss that we're going to get to. So I'm trying to make sure I have the right person here before I grab him. But yeah, Miller Moss was kind of a, highly touted guy for a little bit at USC. He had some up and downs last year. He's going to transfer over to Louisville, where if you look at it, a guy like Tyler Shuck became a second-round pick because of his play over at Louisville. I was thinking B or C to kind of think of.
Yeah, I was thinking more like a low B would be where I would put him.
Low B for Miller Moss. Yeah,
I like his potential. I really enjoy it. He was so good in high school, and him being so bad at USC really, obviously is not ideal. But what you did see from, I thought he was really going to be an incredible player. But one thing that does help is Louisville's got some good talent around them, and he's got a coaching staff, good offensive group. I do expect them to have a pretty decent season that was maybe not better than Tyler Shuck. I actually thought Tyler Shuck had a really good season, but I don't think it will be as good as Tyler Shuck did. But maybe he takes a little bit of a comeback, maybe a nice change of scenery from USC to Louisville might be beneficial for him. The 9 picks was his biggest thing. He was pretty bad. USC also had a terrible offensive line. He was getting eaten alive in that pocket in the Big Ten.
Yeah, a little bit of a rough jump into the Big Ten for USC last year. So you're gonna wait and see. You think he can bounce back with a little bit of easier competition in the ACC. A better offensive, not necessarily a better offensive system because we know what Lincoln Riley can do in terms of work magic for QBs, but a little bit better in terms of you're gonna play a little bit less, worse defenses. And you look what Louisville was able to do against Miami last year. I know Miami's defense was really bad, but they put up, what was it, 40? Was it high 30s or 40 points, something like that last year?
Absolute shootout.
It was a shootout. Like, it required Miami. It required everything on Miami last year, as pretty much every game did. But, that Louisville offense could be very explosive. And so, like, maybe a little bit of bounce back year you could see from Miller Moss if he can get going with that Louisville system. Next, let's see, who do I want to pick out here? Let's go with I'm just gonna toss, just because he's a complete unknown, Ricky Collins here for Syracuse, another guy coming out of LSU, really didn't play at all, just because I'm actually gonna, just to be a little bit nicer, I'm gonna call this the unknown tier, just because complete unknown, guy didn't really play at LSU, and there's a little bit of QB battle between him and let me just double check on that. Syracuse QB battle, but there's a little bit of QB battle between him and another and Steve Angeli, who transferred from Notre Dame. So, but as of right now, for a guy who hasn't started, a guy who hasn't played yet, I think it is only fair to. Oh wait, sorry, let me not.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. He's definitely someone that you have no clue what you're getting out of. I know Syracuse is going to have a pretty good team. I love what Fran Brown is doing over there. I not totally sure how well he will play within their system because we don't know. Just so we don't know.
Yeah, it's just we don't know for now. But if he is the starter, if it's Angeli, we'll see how that goes for Miami when they play when they play Syracuse. I mean, you look at what Syracuse was able to do with Kyle McCord last year. I mean, he had a phenomenal year. Unbelievable year in terms of numbers he was able to put up. So maybe something happens like that for Ricky Collins. Obviously, McCord had played college, had played in the Big Ten previously. So there's a little bit more of experience with what McCord's doing to what you're going to ask Ricky Collins to do. So it'll be interesting. But he has the tools, and you want to see what he can do with the offense that was as explosive as Syracuse was last year. And next up, let's get to Tommy Castellanos. Ooh, I know. LSU here. I mean, not LSU, FSU. Sorry about that. FSU. Tommy Castellanos. Where do we find him? Really explosive runner who, I mean, you look at the numbers under Bill O'Brien, they just stopped using his legs last year as a runner, which it took down. It's weird because you look at what he did at Boston College. His big year in terms of on the ground, we had over 1,100 rushing yards, came with 14 interceptions. He had 18 touchdowns and 5 interceptions last year, but they completely eliminated the running game out of his legs. So where do you think would be fair to put Tommy Castellanos?
Probably I gotta put C tier. I gotta put C tier.
Yeah,
and I'm only saying that. I thought he was actually pretty fun at Boston College because one of the games I remember the most was how well he played against FSU with BC. It was probably one of his better games of his career. Where was he before Boston College? Was he?
I believe. Oh, sorry, I'm blanking on it. Let me pull it up really fast.
Because wherever he was that year before that got him to BC was a pretty solid year for him, and I did like what I saw from him. So
UCF.
Yes,
he was
UCF.
at UCF.
He had a pretty solid year at UCF, and that's probably why that's how he got to BC. And I thought the season was good. He wasn't utilized in the way that you wanted him to. I have no idea what's in store. FSU to me is like the biggest question mark ever. They're like,
you just see how awful they were last year. Hopefully they're awful again. No offense to them, but yeah. And so you're a lot in the air for them, but it'll be interesting to see.
I mean, do I think he's better than DJU? Yes. Is DJU probably the lowest bar you can probably set?
That is an extremely low bar for him to clear. But I mean, hey, you look at what the guy can do with the legs. If FSU can utilize that, could be something interesting, especially for what Miami. Hopefully it'll be different. But you saw what Miami struggled. We'll get to Haynes King later, but you see what Haynes King was able to do in that running QB offense was able to do against Miami last year. And what Kyron Jones to a little bit of an extent was able to do against Miami. So obviously you think it will be different defensively, but a guy who can be explosive with his legs, it'll be interesting to see if FSU gets the most out of that.
Yeah.
And now moving on from Mr. Castellanos, let's go to Kyron Jones, a guy who, his numbers weren't flashy, but when you looked at Miami, you looked at that game Miami had against sorry, let me make sure I have the right pick picked out. Okay, there we go. Where's Kyron Jones? Yeah, you see what Miami had to do to overcome that. Was it complete? Was it incomplete? I don't know. Miami won the game, but Kyron Jones really gave them everything they had. I'm feeling his production really wasn't that high is the really problem. And you're going to lose Bashal Tutin, you're going to lose Jalen Lane if you're Virginia Tech. Two guys who were drafted who were pretty big for them. So I'm thinking C or D here.
I'm thinking C as well. I'm going to say C, but because C is a little bit generous. But also based on I thought that last season he had his moments where he was good. I believe the Vanderbilt game he played was a pretty decent game for him. I think they actually lost that game. And then the Miami game he played very well. But you're right. Losing Tutin and losing Lane are going to absolutely devastate Virginia Tech. Those are two absolute dogs they had, and it kind of worked. They kind of meshed well with Castellanos, or not Castellanos, with Jones. And one thing that what Virginia Tech did the best at us, they ran the hell out of the ball against us so well. They played so well in the run game, and that's honestly what Jones will do. Jones is similar to Castellanos in that he will use his legs significantly, and he's not very good as a passer. I would say he's kind of that. You can call it the Justin Fields build, if you will, of a guy who's can have a good arm, but he runs a lot more than the average quarterback will.
Yeah,
so I'd say a low C is probably fair for him. was high on him last season. His number, the counting numbers were not very good, so I'm okay with a low C.
Yeah, low C is I think is very fair. And then moving off of him, where would you want to go? You want to go to Pitt or NC State? Where would we prefer to go?
Let's go to NC State here.
Okay, we're talking to C.J. Bailey. I was looking up, doing some research on him. PFF's, sorry, I want to make sure I get the name right. Dalton Wasserman called him one of the most underrated players in the ACC. And I kind of, I mean, listening to him talk about it, I kind of get why a little bit. A guy is 6'6", big, strong QB, can run the ball, make guys miss, but he has some issues. The guy is a turnover machine, second highest turnover-worthy play rate in the ACC at 4.6, 8 fumbles last year. So a little bit of a mixed bag, but if you can kind of get him consistently, 17 TDs to 7 interceptions, 5 on the ground. Where would you have CJ Bailey?
Maybe probably in a B tier. I would say B tier.
tier.
So okay. I say that probably because I watched a little bit of NC State football, mainly because one of their tight ends, Justin Jolie, shout out Iona Prep, great player, great tight end. But he NC State to me was pretty underwhelming last season. I thought that they were going to be one of the better teams in the country, and they had a couple so bad games. The Tennessee game was brutal for them. But where you mentioned about the underlying numbers, it's the lack of turnover rate, the fact that he probably is one of their better. Like if you look at the guys that fit that run heavy build of like, he runs a lot, but he also can throw the ball pretty well. He's probably one of the better ones in the ACC at that kind of that role. So I think that he could be a pretty decent player for NC State. I think B is fine. I think he's right next to Miller Moss. Maybe I think that's pretty fair for him.
Yeah, a guy you're projecting a little bit with. It is his, it's his second for full year as a starter.
It's a potential thing. There's a potential.
It's a little bit of a potential thing, and we'll get to potential later, especially when we talk about, that guy over there. But yeah, you're projecting a little bit, but I think you like what you've seen if you're at NC State, and it'll be interesting to see, how he plays against Miami. Especially going into his second year. And so following that up, we're going to go to Pitt. I believe our last ACC opponent I'm going to mention here before we get to actually one other starter, and then actually I'll go to Stanford first. Elijah Brown, I'm going to toss him into the unknown section.
Yep.
He only had 2 touchdowns and 3 interceptions in his little limited play. You don't really know what you're going to get yet necessarily. Fairly unknown. Didn't really play a lot. I'm not going to project necessarily entering his first year as a starter. So there's you're waiting to see on him. You're waiting to see.
All you do know is that he does play for Stanford, and then that's not a great sign already for their offense.
Yeah.
No offense.
A little bit of concerns over there for Stanford as a team. Wasn't very good. So, we'll see what he can do for Stanford over there. But I will get to the last player. 17-7, Eli Holstein. What do you think he could do for Miami potentially? I mean, against Miami.
Well, this is the last game of the season, I believe, right, Pitt?
I think it is very late in the season.
So
I believe it is.
Where are you thinking here? I know you were doing a lot of research on him, and he had that big leg injury last season.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm feeling C as well.
Okay.
I want to just double check on. I want to double check on where Miami plays Pitt.
Well, so I'm looking at some of his
November.
numbers.
It is late November. So,
but before his injury, I'm looking at some of these games, and they weren't really anything special. Against Cal at home, 133 yards, 2 picks. Okay. Syracuse at home, a very good Syracuse team, as we know, after what happened. He had 108 yards, 2 touchdowns. Passing, not really a guy that you're saying I'm very afraid of him and maybe as a passer, just based on counting numbers. And then the rest of the numbers are not as fantastic either against.
And you are a little bit concerned of what his little bit of an injury risk between the leg injury he suffered.
Yep.
So he had a little bit of concerns there.
Him from running.
I think you look at his early season numbers. He was the first 5 weeks of the season. You look at his numbers to start off, and he was 15 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. It was against some weaker competition. but a guy who can really, you can't. I wouldn't necessarily sleep on him fully. I'm
Yeah,
going to put him in this.
I'll give him credit for what he did against West Virginia. Obviously their top rival. 21 of 30, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, and very good in a rivalry game against your most hated team. That's pretty good. Other than that, I'm looking at his games against like very solid teams. I mean, Cal's they weren't a very good team. I know they took Miami to the end, but to have a game like that, or even Syracuse 108 yards, these aren't the numbers that you're saying they're eye-popping numbers.
No, they're definitely not. And you really look at that second half of the season, and he really fell off towards this, and might have been a little bit of injuries that played a factor in there. But he's a guy who can make stuff happen with his legs. Very prototypical stand in the pocket QB, but who can make stuff happen with his legs.
Yeah, but it's also a guy who had 5 touchdowns and 5 interceptions in ACC play.
Yeah, so a little bit of up and down. Another guy, if you're Pitt, you're projecting a little bit to see if he can take another step. I believe last year was his first year as a starter, if I'm not wrong. So yeah, another guy who was a true freshman last year who kind of made stuff happen here and there. But once again, another guy we're projecting with. If we're looking at it.
Yeah.
So that is the end of ACC play. We do have some other ACC QBs here. Not necessarily all of them very interesting. No offense. But I'll, just for fun, we won't play this demon. But where do you have Haynes King?
I'm just very afraid of Haynes King, honestly.
Yeah.
I might just give him an A or a B just because of how afraid I am of him.
Okay, we'll base it off of against Miami.
Against Miami, he's one of the best players in the nation. Let's be real here.
So we'll toss him up here.
In reality, probably a B tier.
B tier, solid guy, especially the way Georgia Tech plays football. They are physical, and he is the engine to that offense.
The way he played against Miami, banged
with
up
a broken arm, not broken shoulder, whatever it was, but
they were like, oh, he won't be able to throw that much. Won't be able to do this, won't be able to do that. He had an incredible running and passing game against Miami.
Very efficient,
but he scares me every time I watch Haynes King play. I'm afraid of Haynes King. I'm afraid of the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. I never want to see them ever again. It is a blessing that we don't play them this year.
Yeah. It is. Thankfully, that will not be. There might be several killers to the season, but Haynes King and the Georgia Tech offense will not be a killer for Miami. This year. And so I'll wrap there. Like I said, there's some other guys over here. Another guy you can look at potentially if you're looking at other teams. Chandler Morris from Virginia. He kind of led the American last year in pretty much everything you could think about. But Miami won't be playing him. Probably similar here. Toss him in the B tier just because that is a guy who Miami does end up playing at some point.
Same with guy, Duke's Darian Mensah, another guy.
Duke's Darian Mensah. That is
he's a good player. He's a very good player. Great. He had a great season at Tulane. Duke is going to be a good team. I'm okay with saying Duke's going to be a good team. I'm not very worried, thankfully, because we don't play them. But I mean, he's a pretty good player. He's probably better than what they had with I can't remember his name, the Texas guy, Malik Murphy.
Malik Murphy,
and they also lost a lot of guys. Their team is built a lot on transfers, so they're a much more veteran team. So I'm not really worried about it.
Would you think B or maybe what are we thinking here?
I would say maybe B.
B? Okay.
Yeah.
I
would, if anything, if we were to rank the tiers, he's probably one of the higher guys in the B tier.
Yeah, okay. So we'll slide him kind of up. Would you have him above Miller Moss?
I would put him above Miller Moss. Yeah, I'm actually very high on him. He had a great season at Tulane, and I know
he was very strong there.
But yeah.
So, I mean, probably the least. You're projecting the least of any. I mean, maybe him or. King. We know what he is. So I guess there's a little mix of guys, but we'll get to projecting here. CJ Carr and DJ Lagway are the last 2 names we're going to end it off here with. Which one do you want to start with, Lagway or CJ Carr?
The thing with Carr is I feel like we have to put him in unknown. We haven't seen him play. This is his first real game, a real test. It's like, I don't know. I have no clue what I'm expecting out of CJ Carr week 1 against Notre Dame. This was there was almost to a point where Notre Dame was rumored to maybe pick up Retzlaff because of potentially that CJ Carr wasn't that guy. I have no clue. So it's a complete unknown, and I think it's actually a good thing that we'll know what he looks like week 1 at Hard Rock Stadium in that hostile environment.
The perfect introduction. Exactly. Welcome to college, buddy.
Exactly.
I just want to say I think George probably dipped already, but I do want to thank him for popping in for 5 minutes, hitting the like button. And sorry you missed it. We're talking about Lagway now. DJ Lagway, where do we have him? I think you're pretty high on him.
I'm very high on DJ Lagway. I know a lot of people don't like him because he's UF. He didn't have the counting numbers that you would think of, but he did lead UF to a very good season post Graham Mertz, his injury. When with the hardest schedule in college football, he had a pretty solid game, or a pretty solid season. So, and he also led UF to some wins against some pretty good teams.
Yeah.
So I want to say he would probably be slated right next to Carson Beck.
Unfortunately, my laptop just died. I'll be back in like 2 seconds.
You're good.
But
I put him right next to Carson Beck. I say that because, I mean, you look at him. He had his ups and downs. He threw a pick in his first game in his first collegiate game, which was against Miami. And then as he filled in for the rest of the season, he got better and better. I know he was in a boot entering this offseason, so there's a little bit more concern about what he might look like as the season goes on. I don't know. I can't really. He's a hard player to predict as well. So once he does, as he does have his first fully healthy, if he will even be fully healthy, there's a lot of up in the air with him. But in terms of true potential as a potential quarterback, he's probably one of the toughest players Miami will be facing all season long in terms of just true potential. He's got that potential. I know there's concerns about his injury. I know there's concerns with UF, another tough season for UF. I'd put him right next to Carson Beck because at least I know I'm probably going to get out of Carson Beck. He's a little unknown, but at least I saw what he did in 2023. DJ Lagway had a good season, but his potential reminds me of Anthony Richardson in that kind of potential. So maybe he balls out against Miami. Maybe he doesn't. Like that's kind of where I am. Also, how healthy is he? That's another big thing.
Yeah, it's a combination of things you're really projecting with him. Kind of not. I mean, unlike not necessarily a lot of different people, but yeah, I think you are projecting with Lagway. And shout out Andrew Corbin. Lagway is that dude. From what I've seen, his highlights are his. I mean, not necessarily. It's not all highlights, but
in terms of genuine potential as a player, dude's a dog, absolute dog. Again, reminds me of the way that we talk about Anthony Richardson in NFL spaces. That his potential is through the roof, but his injuries have me a little concerned for him, and also the fact that UF does have another
China doll. A little bit of an overstatement, but like, yeah,
when he's healthy, if he's healthy, when he's healthy, I would probably put him. I put him next to him. I'd probably put him high A tier. I'd probably put him top player in the A tier, maybe even right next to Klubnik, because this is a guy I truly do believe that could win a Heisman in his career. That's how good he is. This season, I don't know. There's just so much concern that you could have.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it down just a tiny bit. You know, I like Lagway as well, but I'll put him at the bottom of A tier because we are projecting a lot with him.
A lot of projection.
We haven't necessarily seen it yet. I think what the numbers were 12 touchdowns and 9 interceptions last year. Some standout games, but also, like we said, like it could be we've seen guys with the talent and like the ability, and you look at what Anthony Richardson did at Florida a few years ago, and maybe you're projecting because it is a ideal profile, but maybe it won't play into wins necessarily. It could be a guy who gets drafted high.
He's definitely a 2027 first round pick in my eyes. Like he has this. I think he's better as a prospect than Anthony Richardson if he can have a season better than Anthony. Because Anthony Richardson's season with UF was so, you could call it polarizing, but he was also fantastic. The way that he was running the ball and his deep balls are unbelievable. But he also had a lot of pick issues, and he was so raw as a prospect.
Yeah.
You're hoping that Lagway is a little less raw. He's more. I think he probably is. Again, there's just some stuff that's a little up in the air with him that you don't know. You just don't know.
Yeah.
But I do like. I think in terms of who the toughest quarterback on Miami's schedule is slated, I would probably say it would be Lagway.
That is honestly fair because you look at Miami really doesn't have a too difficult group of starter. I mean, maybe Miller Moss, but once again, you're projecting a guy to get back to where we once saw him.
It's
maybe a guy, but as of right now,
it's Lagway and Jennings for sure. It's the toughest quarterbacks that Miami is slated to have this season. If we match up with Clemson in the ACC championship game, then yes, Cade Klubnik would probably take that reign because I do think that he's a Heisman candidate potential right there. So I actually think it's one of Miami's more ideal schedules because of I mean, so many home games. The only problem you can look at is that they play like their last three of their last four home game or last games of the season are on the road. And you end with Pitt and Virginia Tech. A little bit scary. You have no idea what Miami looks like in the cold. But I don't know. I think that I think this is a favorable schedule. I think it's a positive schedule. I think it's a schedule that if Miami gets quality wins, the committee will see them in a favorable position. As we're noticing, honestly, what matters is the games is it the games that you win, or is it having less losses? It doesn't seem like it's losses anymore because
it's about proving yourself again. I think a lot of it is proving yourself against the best teams in the nation. Yeah. And Miami, in all fairness, we'll take a deeper look at their schedule. There's three games. I mean, the preseason teams that we're looking at: SMU, Florida, and Notre Dame are going to be so key for Miami. And you look at where their QBs are. We're projecting. Well, I mean, aside for Kevin Jennings, we're projecting with both Notre Dame and we're projecting with Florida. A little bit of unknown there, but overall, very favorable schedule for Miami to kind of build up wins. As long as they don't slip up. And, we saw what happened last year when Miami slipped up. You can't slip up because I don't think the committee will look on it very favorably, given that there's not that DC isn't looked at as favorably currently in terms of the strength of it outside of a Clemson. So, Miami can't slip up against these weaker teams or against these weaker quarterbacks, but overall, it does look very favorably in terms of their schedule. You look at it and, on the high side, Miami has, on being a little optimistic, Miami has the second best quarterback in the conference. If Carson Beck can play up to where he is, but overall, you have an advantage in a lot of these QB matchups that if being on the more positive side of things.
Yeah, of the three games that you have, the toughest games that we're talking about, two of them are at home, so that's another positive. Only one of them's in Dallas at SMU. It's gonna be a really good game. You're looking and you're saying that Miami's got the home field advantage. You have an incredible opportunity week one to set the tone. If you set the tone week one, it can really lead to some momentum along the way. And I remember thinking about that last season when we beat UF and UF primetime game. Made people look at Miami a little bit differently, and it gave Miami that momentum. It was like, Cam Ward's that dude. I trust that dude with my life. You're kind of hoping that if Carson Beck can kind of do the same, like Notre Dame, he plays pretty good ball, or if maybe not Carson, maybe Carson Beck plays an average game, but the defense just balls out. You could be like, yeah, Miami's going to be in the conversation to get to the ACC championship.